The room wasn't just expensive, it was a cathedral of virtue signaling. Forget the policy specifics. This was theater. Manhattan's annual Climate Leadership Summit, glowing green, all polished mahogany and reflective glass. Every surface shouted wealth, exclusivity, and self-congratulation. It had gathered the usual suspects, hundreds of world leaders who flew chartered, tech billionaires funding their favorite NGOs, and media elites ready to draft their glowing headlines. The walls were a collage of empty promises: green future, net zero 2035, Earth first. Now, before we drop the political dynamite that shut this whole circus down, you need to be ready for what's coming. This is the moment they stopped preaching and started sweating. If you want to see the elite mask shatter in real time, hit the like button, subscribe for the next chapter, and tell me in the comments if you think AOC is walking the talk. Let's go. Up on that blindingly bright stage, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez strode up to the microphone. She was draped in what were described as designer eco-fabrics, which cost more than a year's rent for most of her constituents, clutching a reusable metal water bottle like a sacred relic. She wasn't preparing to give a briefing. She was preparing to deliver a political sermon, an aria of moral superiority. CNN and MSNBC anchors leaned in, whispering the kind of breathless superlatives usually reserved for royalty. Across the front rows, a legion of TikTok influencers sat cross-legged on the floor, phones pointed, already crafting the hashtag and ready to clip her first sentence into another viral, unchallengeable AOC moment. And right then, just as she opened her mouth, just as the gravity of the room had settled entirely onto her perfectly coiffed ponytail, the heavy oak doors at the back of the hall swung open. The sudden physical intrusion was like someone slamming the brakes on a high-speed train. Into the hushed, stunned silence walked Donald J. Trump. He didn't glide, he didn't sneak, he simply arrived. Wearing a deep blue suit and his signature defiant red tie, he adjusted a cufflink. He gave a slight half-smirk, daring the entire room to challenge the sheer audacity of his presence. Whispers died instantly. Secret Service agents, startled, stepped forward. Some of the media elites gasped audibly. Trump didn't blink. He had turned the climate summit in 1 second into a political war zone. AOC paused mid-breath. Her eyes, usually quick and bright, narrowed to slits of cold fire. She didn't offer a polite welcome. She didn't wait for the tension to subside. She slammed the mic. Funny, when we're trying to save the planet, the guy most responsible for destroying it strolls in like he owns the place. A forced, polite round of chuckles rippled from the coastal elites, followed by enthusiastic applause from the college activists. Trump tilted his head, acknowledging the blow, but said nothing. He simply stood there, an immovable object waiting for the predictable force to exhaust itself. AOC kept going, fueled by the familiar righteousness of her script. This man pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord. He backed coal plants. He mocked electric vehicles. He even said wind turbines cause cancer. And now he wants a seat at this summit? The audience swiveled, the expensive cameras following their lead. They tracked the sound of her voice to the silent figure of Trump, who stood still, letting her words hang in the air like toxic smoke, the quiet before the detonation. He knew she was attacking the straw man, and everyone in that room, from the anchors to the activists, suddenly understood that a politician who doesn't fight back immediately has a weapon more loaded than they could imagine. The silence that followed Trump's simple 5-word grenade, "You fly private, right?" lasted only a few agonizing seconds before the entire room became an ecosystem of pure, chaotic journalism. Reporters didn't just type, they scrambled. Phones went up like a desperate electronic wave. The viral detonation was instant. Before AOC could even manage a coherent retort, the clip, the question, and the collective gasp of the elites were being blasted across every platform. TikTok lit up. YouTube Shorts looped the footage. That moment of AOC's frozen, humiliated blink, 24/7. Even liberal commentators, usually safe in their ideological echo chambers, paused for a beat before nervously trying to laugh it off. The line was too clean, too devastating. But Trump wasn't finished. He followed the surgical strike with a devastating populist counterpunch. AOC finally stammered out a weak defense. That's rich, coming from a man who... Trump cut her off, his voice now booming with the unvarnished honesty his base craved. I fly private too, but I'm not the one telling middle-class Americans they can't drive a pickup. You are. The room erupted. Some stood and clapped, others booed, but the final emotion was shock. He hadn't just deflected the attack, he had absorbed it and thrown the weight of his own admitted privilege directly onto her hypocrisy. He had flipped the stage. The attacker was now the defendant, forced onto the defensive in real time. The activist icon, queen of climate TikToks, was being exposed, and the man doing it was the one they swore was done. Then came the digital massacre, the receipts. The internet, in its brutal, decentralized efficiency, did what it does best. It dug. Within hours, the narrative accelerated from mere political theater to documented fact. Photos surfaced, AOC boarding sleek private jets, posing at international climate forums with diamond-clad elites in designer outfits, smiling on red carpets while preaching global equity. The evidence wasn't subtle. It was a digital battering ram. One image in particular went supernova. It showed her, radiant in a black gown, sipping champagne next to a climate billionaire at a Manhattan rooftop gala. Right beside them, a giant LED sign flashed the summit slogan, "Green Future Now." The dissonance was too profound to ignore. The memes wrote themselves instantly. Green future now unless you're in coach. Save the planet unless there's caviar in first class. Jets for me, bike lanes for thee. AOC's team went into immediate damage control, posting a verbose, defensive thread on X, accusing Trump of climate misinformation and coordinated right-wing harassment. But the carefully crafted defense was useless against the crushing weight of the visual proof. The comment section was a slaughterhouse. Just answer the question. You fly private, don't you? No one's buying the script anymore. The narrative had irrevocably shifted. It wasn't about the Paris Accord or policy nuance anymore. It was about class, it was about trust, and it was about elitist lies. For once, AOC wasn't the fresh, powerful voice of the future. She looked staged, tired, and caught out. And Trump, having delivered his punch and watched the chaos bloom, leaned back. He didn't need to say another word. His supporters, independents, and even eco-conscious Gen Zers were doing the talking now, asking the simple, brutal question, why are they telling us to sacrifice when their own travel logs look like a billionaire's itinerary? She wasn't finished. Now the sermon ratcheted up, turning into a full-blown political indictment. AOC leaned into the mic, her voice tightening with practiced fury, determined to force the audience into a state of collective moral outrage. This man pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord, he backed coal plants, he mocked electric vehicles, he even said wind turbines cause cancer. The list was long, familiar, and delivered with the practiced rhythm of 1,000 cable news appearances, hitting every predictable beat. And now he wants a seat at this summit? You're not here to help the planet, she spat, twisting the rhetorical knife. You're here to polish your brand and play the strongman act one more time. But let me remind you, this is a climate summit, not a circus. The resulting applause was instantaneous, loud, and automatic. A rush of virtue signaling noise from the coastal elites and the college-age activists. Several reporters furiously nodded, their fingers flying across keyboards, already typing the self-evident headline. AOC slams Trump, calls summit a circus. But Trump didn't react. He didn't interrupt, he didn't twitch, and he didn't retreat. He simply moved. Just a single unhurried step forward. No rush, no panic. He let her final, dramatic words hang in the air. allowing them to exhaust their own energy until they became nothing more than useless floating confetti. He raised one eyebrow, looked at her, and then slowly, deliberately, swept his gaze across the crowd. Every soul in that room, from the anchors to the most zealous activists, felt a sudden primal dread. They knew the planned script was over. They were watching a fuse burn toward a political detonation, and nobody had time to evacuate. He finally reached the front line of the seating, his hands slipping effortlessly into his pockets. He was calm, cold, and utterly loaded for bear. He slowly, deliberately, looked AOC dead in the eye. This wasn't a rally chant. This wasn't a complex policy rebuttal. It was surgical, ruthless, and aimed straight at the heart of her credibility. He spoke one sentence. It was low, quiet, and absolutely lethal. "You fly private, right?" Boom! The whole room jolted. It wasn't the sound that shattered the moment. It was the sudden, violent death of sound itself. You could literally hear the silence crack like thin ice. The applause, that automatic, self-congratulatory applause, flatlined, leaving a vacuum where moral superiority had just resided. AOC blinked just once. Her mouth, open to deliver her inevitable next clapback, simply shut. For a split second, she looked like someone had been slapped in the face with her own hashtag. Trump didn't pause. His voice rose, ringing out, now stronger, louder, backed by the sudden, irrefutable weight of the truth. "You fly private, right? You take a private jet to these summits, you lecture farmers while sipping $15 organic lattes, you preach to working Americans about climate while living in a high-rise in D.C. run on fossil fuels." Reporters went into a frenzy. Phones went up faster than the Secret Service could register the shift. Journalists were tweeting, recording, and scrambling to capture the moment of the narrative flip. Trump kept pressing the wound. "You're not saving the planet, Alexandria. You're selling a lifestyle, one where the elite make the rules and the rest of America pays for your fantasy." He had flipped the stage. He had taken her own moral high ground and used it as the execution platform. Now the icon of climate justice was simply defending herself from the charge of being an out-of-touch elite. The sting was there, irreversible, and the cameras were zooming in for the close-up. He had turned the attack on its head, and the entire world, through its screens, was watching the emperor realize she had no clothes. The digital detonation from the summit was just the opening salvo. Now came the slow, painful burn of the narrative shift. AOC tried to recover at Columbia University, her team framing the event as a climate justice roundtable. Her stylists had worked overtime, sleek ponytail, an emerald blazer, white heels. She smiled a tight, rehearsed smile, trying to project the image that the Trump incident had been nothing but a right-wing distraction. But everyone in that room had seen the clip, and the damage was done. As she settled at the mic, the inevitable arrived. A student journalist, calm and direct, raised his hand. "Congresswoman," he asked, his voice steady, "have you ever flown on a private jet to a climate event?" The room fell dead silent. It was the moment of truth. AOC blinked, trying to deploy her usual political judo, tilting her head and forcing the trademark smile. "I think we need to refocus on the real threat," she said smoothly, reciting the script, which is climate change denial and the fossil fuel industry's grip on— "Did you fly private, yes or no?" the student interrupted. Boom, a second detonation. The pivot failed. There was a pause, then a muffled chuckle from the back, then another, then the whole room broke into an uneasy, knowing laughter. It wasn't because they were cruel, it was because they saw the pathetic, transparent dodge. The woman who built her brand on confronting power suddenly had no answer to a simple question of personal accountability. The emperor truly had no clothes. She closed her notebook, leaned forward, and mumbled a defensive technicality about chartered flights under necessary circumstances. It was too late. The simple question had won. But the final, fatal blow came from where she least expected it, her own attempt at a media reset.
Facing an irreversible slide, her team contacted CNN, desperate for a controlled, serious sit-down. No debate, no confrontation, just a sympathetic anchor and a scripted path back to credibility. The studio was darkly lit, the camera angles dramatic, the anchor's tone appropriately solemn. The questions were predictable softballs. How do you balance leadership and personal safety? What do you say to those accusing you of hypocrisy? AOC leaned in, rehearsed, and composed. This isn't about jets, it's about justice. Climate change is the defining threat of our generation, and I won't apologize for fighting it with every tool available. The liberal donors and media types in the small live audience nodded dutifully. Then, just before the commercial break, a staffer whispered into the anchor's earpiece. The anchor's face twitched, a telltale sign of TV chaos. "Congresswoman, we just received word that President Donald Trump is on the line. He's requested to respond live." AOC's jaw went tight. "No, I wasn't informed." But the producers had already made the call. Ratings, drama, clicks, they couldn't resist. And suddenly, Trump's voice cut through the studio speakers, crisp, calm, and commanding. He had hijacked the entire segment. "I'll make this fast, because people are tired of fast talkers with slow results. The Congresswoman says it's not about jets, but it is. It's about how the people who want to control your life never seem to control their own. She says climate is the defining threat. I say corruption is. Elite corruption. Private jets, masked hypocrisy, rules for thee, but not for me. That's the threat." AOC tried to butt in, her mic turning on, but the producers didn't mute Trump. He had successfully seized their platform, their message, their entire moment. He finished the thought. "You know what's worse than climate change? Being lied to by someone who preaches sacrifice while sipping champagne at 30,000 feet. Silence. AOC was cornered. Live before millions, the picture of a politician who had just been expertly stripped of her entire moral currency. Trump hadn't just slammed her, he had flipped the mic in real time, exposing a fundamental, raw, and relatable contrast between the elite and the everyday. Backstage, the consequences were already materializing. Even her progressive allies, the squad, were glancing down at their phones, whispering the truth the media wouldn't print. And maybe next time, don't fly private. She wasn't just losing the media war, she was losing her own camp.
The damage wasn't just political anymore. It was personal, corrosive, and irreversible. The CNN ambush, where Trump had effortlessly hijacked the narrative, had shattered AOC's last hope for a controlled media reset. Backstage, the consequences materialized with ruthless speed. Staffers who once clamored to share her every utterance were now silent. Climate influencers, who once hailed her as the Green Warrior, were now quote-tweeting Trump's devastating line with a single, brutal word. Yikes. Even her closest progressive allies in the squad were looking uneasy, whispering the inconvenient truth. And maybe next time, don't fly private. Under this relentless pressure, AOC made her last stand. She called a town hall in the Bronx, her stronghold, her home turf. If anywhere would rally behind her, it would be here, where the buzzwords of justice and fighting the power were gospel. She walked out with her usual fire, mic in hand, ready to pivot back to policy, ready to denounce the fossil fuel industry and powerful white men who ambush. But halfway through her prepared speech, the crowd was different. The energy was curdled. The trust was gone. Then it happened. A voice, loud and clear, shouted from the seats she represented. "Where's your jet parked, Alexandria?" The room laughed. It wasn't the polite, elite chuckle of the Manhattan summit. It was the loud, raw, knowing laughter of the working-class people who felt cheated. Her voice cracked. She doubled down, lashing out. "You think this is funny? You think Trump cares about you? He's a billionaire." But the room didn't quiet. It roared. Because another voice shot back, delivering the final, crushing judgment. "At least he tells the truth." It wasn't Trump's base. It was hers.
and they were slipping away. No amount of progressive rhetoric could scrub the image of the Gulfstream jet and the Champagne Gala from their minds. Her brand was in free fall, her narrative hijacked, her image shattered. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, Mar-a-Lago was quiet. No press frenzy, no staff chaos. Trump sat at the end of a long table, watching the Bronx town hall blow up on a flat screen, volume low. He didn't gloat, he didn't smirk. He simply leaned back and muttered, almost to himself, the core principle of the entire confrontation. Truth always wins. He set the phone down and turned to his communications director, his eyes cold and focused. Draft me one line, just one, the closing act. An hour later, as a wounded-looking AOC tried to salvage the night with a short, defensive Instagram Live from the back of her car, the final detonation occurred. A tweet from Donald J. Trump landed on the timeline. No photo, no tags, no sarcasm. Just one brutal, perfect line of political warfare. She flew private to tell you to ride the bus. 10 words. That was it. The internet detonated. Memes, videos, reaction clips. The phrase was stitched across reels like a war slogan. The narrative was cemented, irreversible. Late-night comedians were forced to tread carefully, unsure how to defend her without looking ridiculous. AOC ended her stream abruptly, defeated, whispering, "He's manipulating everything. This is propaganda." But the comments below spoke the truth. You're not the future anymore. She stared at the screen, paused, and then simply ended the stream. Gone. Back in Mar-a-Lago, Trump hadn't said another word. He didn't need to, because when your opponent walks off stage without applause, you already won. So what just happened? AOC walked into that summit armed with buzzwords and the same old blame Trump routine. She thought the audience would nod, clap, and repost. But she didn't expect the one thing she couldn't spin. Facts delivered with ruthless simplicity. Trump didn't win the argument. He exposed the entire game. This wasn't about climate change. It was about elite arrogance versus working-class reality. Once people saw the mask peel off, they couldn't unsee the private jets and the Champagne Gala. If you understand the difference between sacrifice for thee and jets for me, if you're tired of being lectured by the political class, you know the verdict. Hit the like button, subscribe for more breakdowns of the establishment, and tell us in the comments, who is the real elite and who is speaking the truth?